In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how insulation and energy efficiency can help you save money in your home. For a few years, my wife and I had an apartment in Old Weathersfield. And in the winter, those big drafty windows, you could feel the cold air coming in. And I'm sure as I was heating my house, lots of money was going out the window. Fortunately, we were able to take advantage of some of the tips that I'm going to mention in this video to save ourselves some money. So let's take a look. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at why insulation is needed in a home, what are some different types of insulation, and how insulation is installed. Have you ever worked with insulation? To understand insulation and energy and efficiency, we have to understand how heat flows. Let's take a look. So in science class, they explain that heat flows from warmer to cooler until there is no longer a temperature difference. The principle is the same for a hot cup of coffee that eventually gets cold. If you properly insulate your home, you will decrease the heat flow by providing an effective resistance to the flow of heat. The diagram is showing how hot air rises through convection. Hot air will move through the floors of the house, through the ceiling into the attic, and then to the outside of the house. In the winter, if your house isn't adequately insulated, you will lose the hot air that you're generating to the outside temperatures. As I mentioned before, in the winter, heat will flow from all the heated living spaces to any unheated spaces. Also, in the cooling season, heat will flow from the outdoors to the inside of a house. So we have to prevent that movement of heat as efficiently as possible. So what are some ways to do that? In the winter, there are a number of strategies that you can use to keep your house well insulated. You can seal up drafty windows and outlets using a saran wrap type of application where you wrap your old style windows with the saran wrap type material. Use a hairdryer to make sure that it's nice and tight, and that will create an effective air barrier preventing air moving from inside to outside the house and reduced draft. You can also put weather stripping on doors so when the door shuts, it doesn't allow air to move in between the door. You can also wrap up the hot water pipes in the basement using this foam noodle type material that will help the pipe retain the heat. And also, you want to make sure you shut off any of your outdoor faucets. Those are just 4 winter home tips that you can use to help keep your house efficient in the wintertime. Another thing that I would recommend to every homeowner is a home energy audit. A home energy audit is when a company comes to your house and assesses how well energy is used efficiently in your house. There's been times where I've been able to get free LED light bulbs. I've been able to get rebates, which is money back, on insulating my attic, getting new energy efficient appliances, furnaces, getting new windows installed. Usually it's a government program. Usually it's free depending on your income, and the cost for this is paid through your electric bill. So this is another way as you as a homeowner can save yourself some money. Now, a home energy audit might determine that you need more insulation in your house. What is insulation? Well, insulation is a material that resists heat, sound, or electrical transmission. Where have we talked about insulation before? Insulation is used on wires to prevent the electricity from coming out. Insulation is used in sound booths to help have good sound. And insulation is used in a house to prevent heat transfer in and out of the building. Now, as you look at the diagram, insulation isn't used everywhere. It's used in walls, it's used in ceilings, and it's used around windows. Remember, the idea is to prevent the in and out movement of hot and cold air from your house. Now, to insulate your house, we use air because air is a great insulator. To use air, we use what's called a fibrous material. And they are good to use because they use the air that surrounds the fibers. Think of it as like cotton candy. Cotton candy is kind of puffy. It's got a lot of air inside of it, and that air is a great insulator. Now, insulation should be fireproof, it should be rodent proof, it should be moisture proof, and prevent heat flow. Those are the good elements and characteristics of insulation. When you go to a home center, you will notice that there are lots of types of insulation. You will have rigid insulation, which is in sheets. You have batt insulation, which looks like a mattress. You have blanket insulation, looks like a mattress that's been rolled up. You have a loose fill insulation that looks like those popcorn things they used to put inside packages. And then you have reflective insulation, which is like batt insulation and rigid insulation, but has a reflective shield on it. So these are used in different situations, but they all have the same purpose of providing insulation. When using insulation, it's important to know that insulation has both an R value and a U value. R value basically stands for resistance. It's the resistance to heat transfer. Good insulators have a high R value. Gypsum board, or drywall, has an R value of 1.5. However, if you go ahead and add 12 inches of batt insulation, you now have an R of 38. The higher the R value, the more resistance to heat transfer. The other value is the U value, which is total heat transmission per square foot per hour. If you're installing insulation in your house, you might wonder, how much insulation do you need? Well, how much insulation you need depends a lot on where you live. Now, North America is divided into zones according to climate. Can you see which zone we live in? So we live in zone 5, and if you look, you can see that there's some cold places like zone 7, and there's some very warm places like zone 1, and you can imagine how insulation must differ between those different zones. So they are based on comfort standards, insulation costs, fuel costs, and basically your climatic conditions, what kind of climate you live in. So if you can actually go up to your attic and you can actually measure how much insulation you have and what the R value of your insulation is by using a tape measure. And by measuring how deep your insulation is, you can kind of get an idea of what your R value is. When my wife and I bought our first home, we noticed that our second floor was really, really drafty and cold on our first winter. It wasn't very fun. Well, we went up to the attic and we noticed that we had about R1 worth of insulation. After having a home energy audit, we had an insulation company come in and blow about 16 inches of blown-in insulation into our attic. This saved us a lot on our energy bill because we weren't as cold on the second floor. That increase in insulation has saved us money and also increased the comfort level of our home. So having proper insulation is very, very important. It's important to have insulation properly installed inside your house. A common issue here in Connecticut is what are called ice dams. An ice dam can happen when you have snow on the roof of your house. If not properly insulated, an ice dam can form. An ice dam is a ridge of ice that forms at the edge of a roof and prevents melting snow from draining off the roof. The water that backs up behind the dam can then leak into the home and cause a damage to walls, ceilings, insulation, and other areas. The warm air in the attic causes the roof to warm and the snow to melt. So to fix this, you can increase ventilation, add insulation, and sealing off every possible air leak that might have on their side of the roof. However, the best thing to do is to call a professional because it long-term can damage your house. Have you worked with insulation before? If you have, you know that when you're working with insulation, it's important to wear gloves, it's important to wear a respirator, and it's important to wash your clothes after you use it because insulation can cause a very, very itchy reaction to your skin. In your next lesson, you'll take a look at the pros and see how they use insulation to help improve the energy efficiency of an attic. So in this video, we talked about insulation. We talked about why insulation is needed in a home, the different types of insulation that is used, and how insulation is installed. We also talked about some ways to keep your home energy efficient to help save you money. Thanks for watching.